For me, I like to think about our soil management, or what is described as in Dr. Elaine Ingram's website as the soil food web, which she kind of trademarked and popularized. So what is the soil food web? And then how do we look at, if I understand what is the web of life, how do I have an integrated approach to building soils? So what does it take for me to make the soils grow, for instance? So what is soil? Well, soil is a mixture of different components. So typical soil that we would find in a non-agricultural context, if we go to dig up like in a forest, is going to be comprised of minerals. So soil is 45% rock particles. Okay? Rock has been broken down through geologic processes, bacterial processes, and tree root interactions to form our soil. 25% of the volume is water. So if I dehydrated it, I could take out water. Air, so if I compress it, I can compress out air. And then 5% is leaves, or described as leaves, or what we would say is organic matter. So typical soils only would be comprised of 5% organic matter. So you can see when we make compost, which is 90% organic matter, and then add into our gardens, how much more organic matter there would be in what we might call normal soil conditions. So if we put this all together, this is what supports life on the earth, what's called the geological cycles, or mineral cycles. So these minerals are what is the building blocks, if you will, of us. Without them, we get diseases, animals get diseases, plants get diseases tied to these mineral cycles. So that's what we want to look into. Scientists classify this as clay, loam, sand, or gravel, and then we'll see later a relationship so that you can classify what type of soil do I have. So what 3 essential ingredients does it take to make soil live or be alive? We need air, water, and we need organic matter, okay? So we have to, like we did, we went around the farm to find the best organic matter that we could at this time of year. And we went in and we added water and we flip it to provide aeration. And then the microbes come alive. That's the heat that we saw this morning. And they're doing their thing because we created the right conditions for them. So what makes it possible for these things to live, like plants, bacteria, fungi, earthworms, or insects? So these things are all living in the soil. So we want to try to get to an understanding of what is needed for them to thrive. What type of house do they like? What type of food do they like, right? What type of environment? And how do we recreate that? And then if we do that, they'll breed and increase their numbers. And if they increase their numbers, say for instance, our plants have more access to food, our plants would get bigger because they have more to eat. So it's the soil composition is important. What is the composition? This can affect water retention. This can also affect nutrient uptake. So soils are composed of mineral matter, organic matter, and they contain pore space filled with water. So we have to have a relationship of airflow and also water retention. So the water is using friction and what's called capillary action, we'll see later, to adhere to the surface area of, say, sands, clays, chars, any type of structure. Inside of the little water droplet, if you'd imagine a drop of water, this is microscopic, but imagine a drop of water. Inside of the drop of water is the bacteria and stuff living inside like the drop of water, okay? Attached to the structure. So this is a typical composition that we may find in soils. This brings to the concept that soil scientists will describe the soil texture. So what is its composition and what is the texture? Soil texture is determined by the size and the type of particles that make up the soil. So if we describe soil as silty loam, it would be high in silt, so 70% silt. If it's sandy, you may find 65% sand. So that would be a sandy loam. If it's just loam, that's described as like the perfect balances, where we have something like clay to silt. Silts being a lot of times broken down organic matters to a certain extent, a way to think about it, and our sand. So that would be the optimal. Nobody really has the perfect, some places in the world, but very few, have the perfect soil mixture, okay? But we can work when we make our own designer soils or potting mixes. We can work to get close to this. If we think about the texture, we can look at sizes. So this is to scale, meaning that if I take a piece of gravel, or maybe more easy for you to imagine sand. So if I have one piece of sand sitting on my finger, yeah, you could see it. The clay is microscopic. So a clay particle is microscopic in comparison to a piece of sand. I can't see it. So when you get all that clay and pack it together, that's why the water and the air can't go through, because it's so packed. There's no place for air. There's no place for water when we have too high of sands. So soil texture influences the nutrient retention because sands, right? They're inert. They're functionally made of like glass. So they don't conduct electricity. So we need things that can conduct electricity. And also we want to provide surface area. So for instance, the finer textured soils tend to have greater ability to store soil nutrients. So that little clay one, you can't see it because there's nothing there. And you can't really, even on here, I can't see the sand. It's that small. So a gravel being this big, sand being sitting on my finger, one little piece, a speck, and it's impossible, you can't see clay. So that brings to scientists describing the types of soil based on their structure. So they go to your site and they'd say, your soil is granular, grainy, or your soil is blocky, or prismic, columnar, platy, or single grain. So we'll look at these in pictures to see what does that mean. So types of soil based on structure. A granular soil is something like sandy soils, granular, little pieces of grains. If something is blocky, it tends to have like little blocks stacked up on top of each other, blocky. Prismatic makes columns, okay? So you might see clays breaking into what would be prismatic. Then you have platy, so we could have soils that like to overlap on each other. So if we cut a soil profile, we'd see like different overlaps. And or single grained, which is to be like pure sand. I just picked up sand, there's nothing there, just sandy.